Hello, friends. Do you have a moment so that we may discuss our Lord and Savior Minarchy? No, seriously, I'm just kidding. Hi, my name's Rick Robinson. I am the general manager of KLRNradio.com. We are probably the largest independent podcast network that you've never heard of. We have a little bit of everything, and by that, what I mean to tell you is we have news, pop culture, special events, conspiratainment, true crime, mental health shows, drama productions, and pretty much everything in between. So if you're looking for a new podcast home to grab a little bit of everything that you love all in one place, come check us out. You can find us on X under @KLRNradio. You can find us on our Rumble and our YouTube channels under the same names. You can also find us at KLRNradio.com and pretty much every podcast catcher known to man. So again, feel free to come check us out anytime you like at KLRNradio.
I'm Noble McIntyre of McIntyre Law, and I've been representing injured Oklahomans and their families for almost 30 years. At our firm, we've handled hundreds of crashes involving semis. They are huge vehicles, and when fully loaded, can weigh as much as 80,000 pounds. Most semi drivers are careful and professional drivers, but some big truck drivers and the companies they drive for are dangerous, and I've personally seen the devastating effects on families. If you or a loved one has been affected by a semi crash, contact us at 405-777-7000 or McIntyreLaw.com. We will fight for you.
Achieve platinum status in the Fuel Rewards program at Shell and save 10 cents per gallon on every fill. Right now, you're less than 5 miles away from your closest Shell, so make a pit stop this afternoon and fill your tank with Shell V-Power Nitro Plus Premium Gasoline. Click the screen now to learn more about platinum status in the Fuel Rewards program or download the Shell app today. Platinum status is earned with 12 fill-ups over 3 months, 10-gallon minimum per fill-up at participating Shell locations. Terms apply. Visit www.fuelrewards.com/status.
It's back to school season for the kiddos, which means it's the perfect time to get your vacay on. Beaches are empty, resorts are quiet, and Cheap Caribbean Vacations has fall vacay deals up to, wait for it, 45% off.
Plus, you can score more site-wide savings and take an extra $50 off your booking now through September 5th. Take this as your sign to pencil in a vacay this fall and turn back to school season into back to beach season.
Go to cheapcaribbean.com to find your next all-inclusive vacay. Offer ends September 5th.
You can achieve platinum status in the Fuel Rewards program at Shell twice as fast by filling up 6 times with Shell V-Power Nitro Plus Premium Gasoline. Right now, you're less than 5 miles away from your closest Shell, so make a pit stop this afternoon and fill your tank with Shell V-Power Nitro Plus Premium Gasoline. Click the screen now to learn more about platinum status in the Fuel Rewards program or download the Shell app today. Platinum status is earned with 12 fill-ups over 3 months, 10-gallon minimum per fill-up at participating Shell locations. Terms apply. Visit www.fuelrewards.com/status.
Hi, everyone. This is JJ, the co-founder of Good Pods. If you haven't heard of it yet, Good Pods is like Goodreads or Instagram, but for podcasts. It's new, it's social, it's different, and it's growing really fast. There are more than 2 million podcasts, and we know that it is impossible to figure out what to listen to. On Good Pods, you follow your friends and podcasters to see what they like. That is the #1 way to discover new shows and episodes. You can find Good Pods on the web or download the app. Happy listening.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
The following program contains coarse language and adult themes. Listener discretion is advised.
Do a lot of true crime. True crime. I listen to it at night. I like the girl talk. It makes me feel alright. I like scary stories in the morning, and I like them at night. I like the girl talk vibes. They make me feel just fine. I listen to a lot of true crime.
Welcome to Front Porch Forensics Podcast. Thank you all for joining us, all the fans and friends. of KLRN Radio. We're live on Facebook and on X right now, as always. I am Daniel, your host for the evening. Sitting along beside me is our hostess with the mostest,
Laura. So you can say my name. It's okay.
Tonight's episode, we put out the advertisements for it, some warnings kind of up front that this is going to be a very rough one, to say the least. The type of crimes he did and the way he did them were very sexual oriented and extremely graphic, but we're going to do kid gloves the best we can. We're not going into too much detail as far as exact things that happen, but we're going to have to cover some of it just so you get the idea and you understand what's going on. Again, listener discretion is highly advised. If you've got little kids, I don't know why in the world you let them listen to our show in the first place, but this is not the night to do it. So
they want them to grow up like Laura.
Right.
I'm not entirely sure that's a good thing.
Oh yeah, but tonight's show is definitely sexual in nature as far as.
I mean, this one's very rough for both of us.
Yeah.
Like we decided to do David Parker Ray tonight because we didn't want him like looming on the horizon. We just wanted to go ahead and get him out of the way.
Yep. So this is Front Porch Forensics. This is the one about David Parker Ray. So please grab a chair and join us on our front porch.
Yeah, usually, I mean, most of the crimes that we always cover, they're all very rough. I mean, these are murders. I mean, people are hurt and killed, but this one involves just a lot of rape and torture.
Yeah.
So, like he said, just if you know what you can handle, then, stay. If you don't think you can handle it, you're not going to hurt our feelings.
You hurt my feelings terribly because we need the views and the clicks and the just put it on mute and let it play in the background. You'll be fine.
Yeah, usually when someone commits these heinous crimes, we're often left with the same exact questions every time. The first one just being why. And then that follow-up is, what made them do this? What drove them to do this? There has to be some reason. Usually in most cases that we cover, the motives are usually pretty obvious in most murders. You got greed, you got lust, envy and jealousy, revenge, things like that. They're pretty typical. Then we get crimes that defy those easy answers. So tonight's episode goes into one of the most depraved and sadistic minds we've ever come across, and that is David Parker Ray's. Ray was born on November 6th of 1939. So I didn't even know that it was his birthday coming up, so I did not do this intentionally. He was born in, I think it's called Belen, New Mexico. He is one of America's most viciously brutal alleged serial killers, and the reason I'm saying alleged right now is because Ray holds a unique position in the arena of serial killers. To this day, no bodies have ever been found, and he was never convicted of a single murder. But during his childhood, he and his younger sister Peggy lived with their grandparents, who were said to be strict disciplinarians. David was visited off and on by his father, who was a violent alcoholic, but his father would bring David magazines with sadomasochistic pornography. So this is where David's paraphilia comes in, and we've covered paraphilia in a previous episode, but as a refresher, paraphilia involves sexual arousal to atypical objects, situations, and or targets like children, corpses, animals, what have you. For a paraphilia to be considered a disorder, those feelings and fantasies have to be intense and recurrent and cause significant distress and or impairment to like your basic daily life, your functions, your work, your relationships, everything you do in your daily life, just day-to-day stuff.
Now, that's a kind of, we see that pattern a lot with serial killers and depravity like that.
Most all serial killers have one paraphilia or another.
Well, even his home life.
What is it? Jerry Brudos was the shoe fetish killer.
Right.
So,
but even his home life, like he was a broken home because he was living with a grandfather.
He had very little to no contact with his mother. His father is a violent alcoholic.
Right.
So,
the father, from what I read, the father just comes in and out of his life at will and basically crashes there on the drunk benders.
Yeah.
And then supplies the kid with what apparently is probably what his sexual deviancy is as well. Those type of magazines.
He was into,
yeah. So he kind of was implanting that on the boy, and he was physically abusive as well when he was around, right?
So I mean, we've got him. I never could find an age about when his father was bringing him these magazines. But I assume he's, prepubescent at this point. He's young.
Point. I didn't get an exact age, but from what I read, it definitely sounds.
He's still very young at this point. So his first, I guess, experience or knowledge of sex is extremely brutal.
Yeah.
Like, this is what he is taught that it's like. I mean, pornography is not healthy in general for children.
Yeah.
But that kind, especially for a young boy, already in a bad home situation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is a recipe for disaster, and it very obviously was.
Yeah. So it's basically like, here, son, it's time to have the talk. Read this magazine.
Yeah.
And it was the world's worst magazine to get any information from.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of people into the BDSM type of stuff. No fault to y'all, but it's not exactly a paraphilia at that point, because BDSM in and of itself is not really atypical. It's just somebody's preference.
Yeah.
But this becomes, for a very young child, his only knowledge of sex is that it's very violent, it's abusive. I mean, it's harmful, And I guess in his mind, these women, because I guess they have to act like it's being done against their will, for the photos or for the videos.
Yeah, it's very very one-sided.
Yes.
So,
I mean, I think pornography is exploitative to women in general, but that particular style of it is even worse.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of going into now, he's in adolescence. He's a teenager. He went to Mountain Air High School in New Mexico, but he was ironically bullied because he was so shy around girls. So that's when he started abusing alcohol and drugs. So now, added to the paraphilia, the abuse, broken home, all these other things, now we add in substance abuse.
Well, I wonder if him being shy around girls is because the only girls he really saw was in those magazines. So every time he would see one in real life, he would.
And they're talking, they're assertive.
Yeah, even subconsciously, that's what's in his mind.
He's so you're not subservient, you're not quiet, you're not.
So he didn't know, not necessarily shy, it's just that he didn't really know how to react. So he got quiet,
Right.
Which would come across as shy, obviously.
And of course, once puberty sets in, obviously everybody knows how teenage boys can be when puberty hits.
Mm-hmm.
So this is about the time that his fantasies of raping, torturing, and even murdering women developed. So this paraphilia, this fascination with violent sex that was instilled in him since childhood, has now come into almost a maturity. He hasn't done quite anything just yet. When he was 14, his sister Peggy found sadomasochistic drawings that David had done and the pornography that he was collecting, which naturally she takes a step back, and this kind of leads to them becoming estranged. And some of the readings was after the grandmother died, because you remember they were living with the grandparents. After the grandmother died, the kids are kind of split up. David stays with his grandfather. I never heard where the sister went, but I'm assuming a different family member.
All I saw was other family members. I didn't see if were to be an aunt or an uncle, but she got out of the situation, thankfully, because she very well could have been a victim too. I mean,
he wouldn't have fetishized her maybe because she was a sister, but the sadomasochism, he still probably very easily could have tortured her. And
I ain't putting anything past him, honestly.
I mean, he even said, according to statements that he has made in the past, like his assaults began in adolescence.
Yeah, after he gets arrested and he starts talking openly about it, he said that he was in his 50s, late 50s when he got arrested. Isn't that right?
Something like that.
And he said that he'd been attacking women and raping them and using them for over 40 years. He started. He said, "Do you have his quote wrote down?"
No, because
he said his exact quote I can't remember. He basically said, as soon as he learned how to tie their hands up, he started raping the girls.
Get out of it. Yeah.
So, and it also said something about as soon as he started masturbating too. So it was right around that time, young teenager, adolescent type.
I say we're thinking maybe 12, 13.
Somewhere around there. But he said that as soon as he learned to tie knots so they couldn't get away and tie them up, that's when the rapings began.
Started, yeah. I mean, that's fairly typical too for a lot of the killers or the perpetrators that we talk about. That's extremely common that a lot of these issues start popping up by the time puberty hits, and they just steadily, increasingly get worse closer to adulthood that you get.
Right.
I mean, even especially with some of them that have the severe mental illnesses and disorders like paranoid schizophrenia, that usually comes full circle at about age 25.
Mm-hmm.
Very intense goings on leading up until then, from teenager to about that point.
Well, we saw that with the last show with Richard Chase.
Yeah.
Where it got worse and worse, and as he got into his 20s, that's when it really started. He lost complete control at that point.
I mean, it really sunk its teeth in, for sure.
That the developmental stages of your mind and your brain going that way.
I say, if they're already going that way, your brain is already rewired in a completely different way than a typical brain is.
Mm-hmm. It's an abnormal.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, of course, all these things, that's normal. It's pretty standard for, all this stuff to start happening from puberty into adulthood. And into adulthood after high school and everything. He was actually in the Army. He was doing like general mechanic work for them. He did get an honorable discharge, so he served his time and everything, and he got out. And then after his discharge, he became a maintenance man for the New Mexico Parks Department. And he actually held that job until his arrest, which for most of them, for organized killers like this, or, organized perpetrators, I don't know that we can necessarily call him a killer because they're...
Well...
I'm going to call him a killer because that's the only logical explanation there.
But I got researching later on when we get to that point where, he did kill.
Yeah.
So.
But, this is not atypical either for organized killers. They usually will have, from all outward appearances, a normal life. Like they can hold down a job. I mean, this guy had girlfriends. He was married and divorced 4 times before he hooked up with Cindy Hendy. Which that sounds like a made up name, but I promise it's not.
Mm-hmm.
In his adulthood, he had converted a semi-trailer, which Daniel can probably, I think I sent Rick pictures of stuff like this so he can start kind of floating them up on the screen for those of y'all who can see. But just a basic trailer that you would see on the back of like a 18-wheeler or something, just kind of a small one.
Yeah, it looked like a shorter one, like probably a 35 to 38 foot, 40 foot at the most container style box trailer. One of the heavy duty style, so it's got thicker walls instead of the typical thin walled ones. Yeah. But it's 18-wheeler trailer. So
just kind of the standard thing. It wasn't anything fancy, but it's estimated that he spent about $100,000 retrofitting this thing to create a kind of very elaborate torture chamber that he called his toy box.
Yeah. That's the picture of the inside of it right there.
Yeah. And I'm actually about to start naming off a lot of the stuff that you see here. He actually had this trailer soundproofed. That right there, that image is an obstetrician's chair. And, any woman that's listening, they automatically come with the stirrups already.
Yeah.
And
like a gynecologist chair, right?
Yes, it's a gynecological chair. But he actually retrofitted it with more restraints added to it rather than simply the stirrups. The stirrups he kept for obvious reasons. And this is where it kind of starts getting really difficult for me to talk about because as a woman, like, we don't enjoy going to the gynecologist. Like in that chair, that is the most exposed and vulnerable you can be with another human being.
Right. If you can see the picture now, you see the chair there, and he's obviously got extra straps for the waist. There's straps for the legs throughout, for the arms as well. Once he's get these women in that seat, they're not coming out of it. He's got complete and total control over them at that point. He also had, if you see along the walls, and that's hanging in different areas there, he stocked his toy box with various sex toys, whips, chains, pulleys, straps, clamps, a leg spreader bars, surgical blades, electric shock machines, and saws. And obviously you can use your imagination to come up with what all these things are for. Some of them are by their name are very obvious what they're for. The electric shock machines, I know in one of the statements that Cindy says after her arrest is that they use cattle prods a lot and the handheld taser type things. But he also had some more intricate ones that was hooked to clamps that he could clamp on the person and then
certain places.
In certain places, even inserting them in certain places. And then he could control the shock by a dial to turn the power up and down. So he had very elaborate toys, as he called them, or tools.
And like you pointed out when we were doing our research and everything, because he has just this general mechanics knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
He knows how to use tools. He probably knows how to weld. So obviously when he was building his toy box, he's not hiring contractors because people will start asking questions like, hey, what's all this stuff for? What are you doing here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the trailer, and he mentions it later on, it's soundproof to the point that it's if you can stand outside of it, it's almost sound as in you can't hear it. I mean, it's perfect, almost perfectly soundproofed. And he always would park the trailer in secluded areas. So
for the most part, what I read, a lot of times it stayed like next to his house.
Yeah, he had it tucked out back.
Yeah.
So, I mean, unless you were right up against the trailer, you couldn't hear anything going on. And as far as ways that it was kept,
also mobile. So
yeah, it was mobile for sure.
We have to keep that in mind. I mean, all of this didn't happen just out in his backyard.
Right. He, along with all of his tools and toys, he constructed elaborate things like a fur-lined coffin. And I don't even want to begin to think why. Maybe he kept them locked in it or something.
I was about to say, I think that's more of a psychological torture. I mean, that's a very common fear, is the fear of being buried alive or your own death. So when he tells these girls, I'm going to put you in this coffin and you're going to stay there for God knows how long, they don't even know if he's going to come back and ever let him out.
Yeah, that's true. He could have done that for sure. That's more likely. I would assume that's why. He also made a makeshift pillory, which is
essentially like the stocks. You have the hole for the head to go through and the hands and arms to go through the rest of it.
Yeah, you've seen them, the medieval thing where they would lock them in the stocks out into the courtyard and people would come by and mock them. But I'm sure he wasn't mocking them. Well, he was probably mocking them as he was doing other things too. So
that was part of the degradation that he made them go through. So.
Right. And Ray also would strap victims in a contraption that he made that bent them over in a, bent over position, strapped down so they couldn't get away. And he allowed his friends and even a dog to use these women to rape them. So he had accomplices already. There was more than just him involved. He had some male friends that partook, and apparently a canine as well, which is
to me, that's insult to injury. I mean, not only are you humiliated and degraded in the worst possible ways, but then he brought in a dog.
Mm-hmm. And while all this is going on, Ray had mounted mirrors on the ceiling of his trailer above the chairs, and that way his victims were made to watch everything he was doing to them through those mirrors. So they couldn't even get away from what was happening.
I say there's really no mental escape, because I think some of the things that I read that he would like tape their eyelids open and everything if they refused to watch, if they refused to open their eyes.
Probably so.
The torture was the paraphilia. That was any killings that, he may have done, I think were just kind of incidental. It was just tidying up to him. The torture was the entire point.
Yeah, that's what I mean. The pleasure, he took pleasure through it.
Yeah, that was his paraphilia. That's how he got his sexual release, was through the torture.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not torture like, maybe we had talked about Dahmer, and the things that he was trying to do to create quote unquote zombies out of his victims so that they would never leave him. And, he'd have a partner for life, basically. This is not that kind of torture. This is I don't even know that I have a word for what he put these women through. And it makes it so much worse that he has a tape that he made and that he would play. And the tape runs about 45 minutes. We are not going to obviously play all of it. We've got a short clip that we'll play for you real quick. But he made these women listen to this before he ever did anything to them. So, Rick, if you've got that queued up, let's go ahead and get that out of the way.
Warning: graphic content. Listener discretion is advised. Walking, bicycling, jogging. Anytime an opportunity like that presents itself and it's not too risky, we'll grab her, even if we've already got a captive in the playroom. Variety is definitely the spice of life. Now, I'm sure that you're a great little piece of ass and you're going to be a lot of fun to play with, but I will get tired of you eventually. If I killed every bitch that we kidnapped, there'd be bodies strung all over the country. And besides, I don't like killing a girl unless it's absolutely necessary. So I've devised a safe alternative method of disposal. I had plenty of bitches to practice on over the years, so I've pretty well got it down pat. And I enjoy doing it. I get off on mind games. After we get completely through with you, you're going to be drugged up real heavy with a combination of sodium pentothal and phenobarbital. They are both hypnotic drugs that will make you extremely susceptible to hypnosis, auto-hypnosis, and hypnotic suggestion. You're going to be kept drugged for a couple of days while I play with your mind. By the time I get through brainwashing you, you're not going to remember a fucking thing about this little adventure. You won't remember this place, us, or what has happened to you. There won't be any DNA evidence because you'll be bathed and both holes between your legs will be thoroughly flushed out. You'll be dressed, sedated, and turned loose on some country road. Bruised, sore all over, but nothing that won't heal up in a week or two. The thought of being brainwashed may not be appealing to you, but we've been doing it a long time and it works. And it's the lesser of two evils. I'm sure that you would prefer that in lieu of being strangled or having your throat cut. In June of 1986, Jessie went into an FBI branch office in Albuquerque and filed a complaint against her father. She told the agents that David had kidnapped and tortured women, then took them to the Mexican border where he sold them into sex slavery. The FBI brought David in for questioning multiple times where he was open about his proclivity for sadomasochism. Without any evidence that he had done anything wrong, the FBI dropped the investigation. After that, Jessie did a 180 and accepted her father's behavior. She had tried to stop what he was doing, and the FBI didn't seem to care, so since she couldn't beat him, she apparently decided to join him. David seemed to also be affected by the FBI dropping the investigation against him. He likely felt emboldened, which made him escalate his behavior. David put all of his focus into developing the perfect torture chamber. He began studying psychological methods to mentally break down his victims. He purchased a 22-foot-long cargo trailer and parked it on his property. He soundproofed the trailer and added a sturdy deadbolt.
Yeah, that's like I said, that's talking about his trailer and all there too. Give a little bit of background on David and retouched on that trailer, but that first section there was actually, like I said, just a few minutes of a 45-minute long tape that these women would wake up to.
Yeah, he would already have them strapped into the chair.
Because how he would get, like, this one woman who survives and actually ultimately winds up getting him caught, leaves a story about how she was caught. And I can go ahead and go over that part at least, because it I said
he was a predator. He stalked his prey. I mean, right. All of that, the hunting did happen, as it does with most organized killers.
And he would get, now, I'm not sure where to start exactly, because he had I'm going to step back and talk about his accomplice, Cindy
Hindi.
Cindy Hindi, because we've already mentioned her before. And she matters on hunting and getting these victims. So let's start with Cindy. So Cindy Hindi.
We may could even take a step further back, actually, because I did mention, and I was going to bring this up, his daughter was actually someone that he used too to help him hunt women. And she tried to tell the FBI at the time. Well, I mean, that's pretty much it. So
FBI just didn't believe her, or what?
There was just not enough to go on.
Okay. And Cindy, she was from Washington, and I can't remember what.
She was from Washington State. Do your notes go into why she was in New Mexico?
Yeah, but if you want to tell that part again.
Oh, no, it's just she was actually, he met her through his job because I think she was another park employee somewhere else. So, of course, his job took him, and that's how they met. But she was actually running from Grand Theft Auto convictions and drug charges, from what I know.
Yeah, and so she winds up in New Mexico, and that's where she met Dave Parker Ray, and they quickly bonded over their shared sexual fantasies. And at some point, her and her very abusive boyfriend, surprise, surprise, winds up breaking up, and she had no place to go. So she goes to David's house because she didn't have no place else to go in New Mexico. She didn't know nobody else down there. So this is her words here. Well, let me say it. Ray was 20 years older than Cindy. And that when they began living with each other and started their relationship, she was 37, which would put Ray at 57. And so this is Cindy's own words here. When I moved in, he started to tell me about all the women that he had murdered. He said it was at least one every year for over 40 years.
So that's at least, if he was telling the truth, 40 victims. Right
at least
there.
40
at least.
that he says he killed. Now, he also says that he didn't kill them all, that he would release them with this so-called brainwashing and release them.
Now, see, that's familiar because his first wife, she told police that he had told her that he had murdered a woman by tying her to a tree, torturing her, and then finally killing her and dismembering her and burying her and all this stuff. But police never could get any verification from him on that. So, I mean, that's kind of up in the air.
Remember that because his daughter reported it first. His ex-wife reported it second.
I say, I don't know when the reports happened, but that's the first ex-wife alleges that, yes, he told her openly. And I mean, in detail, what he did to at least one woman.
Right.
So 2 people have already come out and said, this guy's dangerous, but apparently he is. And this is the thing with organized killers. They are of either average or above average intelligence. So they kind of know how to hide their tracks, how to keep everything secret for longer. That's why they get away with stuff for so long.
I mean, they never found a body.
No,
so
never.
He obviously knew what he was doing when it came to disposal, because I 100% believe he killed him.
Yeah,
I do.
We were talking about this earlier, y'all, during just talking over our notes with each other, that even though there have been no convictions, there are no bodies ever were recovered, there's no logical way that he let those women live. There's just not. I do not believe that those women are alive.
I don't either. Because here's the thing. If let's say his brainwashing thing worked, where he would brainwash them and so that they would forget anything that ever happened to them, dress them up and drop them out on some deserted road. Let's assume that worked. All right. This dude is the greatest therapist or
I said CIA could have used him. Jeez.
I mean, my goodness, he can brainwash people like that. He's a genius, evil genius level.
But see, even let's grant that is true, that he is like this massive intellect and he is capable of doing these things. Those women, are still going to resurface somewhere.
Somewhere, yeah.
Like people are going to notice, hey, you're that missing woman.
Yeah.
They would have turned up alive.
Yeah, you can't have 60 women that just miss weeks and months at a time. Because he says in that tape, I don't know if it's in that clip we played, he tells them that you're going to be here for 1, 2, maybe 3 months until I get tired of you.
Yeah, he and Cindy, they abducted about 4 to 5 women every year and kept them for 2 to 3 months on average, each one.
Yeah.
But that tape, again, if y'all want to go find it, it is on YouTube. But he goes, these women wake up not knowing where they are, not knowing who took them. They're in this terrifying place. I mean, arguably terrifying. If I wake up in a place like that and I see all that crap around me, there's going to be panic. So these women, they have absolutely no idea what's going on. Then all of a sudden this tape starts playing.
Right.
And they hear in excruciating detail. And he's in just a very matter-of-fact voice. But he's telling them, like, play by play, in intimate detail, everything that he's going to put them through.
Yeah.
I mean, the psychological torture is what he got off on. I mean, even in the clip that we played for y'all, he said, I get off on mind games.
Mm-hmm. And like I say, Cindy being his partner, his accomplice, she didn't just stand by and watch it, or she didn't play dumb. She knew what was going on because she actively helped him hunt.
She was an active participant in the sexual torture too, because in another part of the tape, he says that the women are going to have to service her too.
Yeah. So, and for instance, in March of 1999, Cynthia Jaramillo,
maybe?
Jaramillo,
in New Mexico. You would think that J is the...
Yeah. Anyway, she was working. She's a streetwalker, and she's working the streets in Albuquerque. Cynthia had a set of rules for working the streets to keep her safe because she had been working the streets since she was 13 years old.
So she kind of knew the ins and outs, how to be safe, what to look out for.
Yeah.
Probably got to learn to listen to her instincts very, very closely. And
her first rule, she says, was do not get into an RV.
Smart. But
her quote is, I don't know what was going through my head that day, but I broke all my rules right then and there. When we get back to his RV, he pulls out a badge and throws handcuffs on my wrist, claiming to be an undercover cop, that he was arresting her for prostitution. And
that's not uncommon. I hate to say it. I mean, that's why we even tell the Tiny Tyrant now that she's going to be driving soon. Just, cop pulls up behind you, find a well-lit place that, people are there.
Yeah.
Pull in there, pull over there, put your flashers on, let them know you've seen them, but get to a well-lit public place.
Yeah. And her quote is, I was like, wait, no, this isn't right. You're not a cop. David Parker Ray pushed her into the RV and was kind of pushed her into the RV like that. And she was fighting him, trying to get away. And he says, well, she pushed him back. He falls backwards. And she's still handcuffed at this point. She gets her hand on the door to get back out of the RV. And she hears him say, Cindy. Her name is Cynthia. People called her Cindy that knew her. So she said, when he said my name, I froze. Her quote is, I was literally, my fingertips were touching the door when he yelled Cindy. That freaked me out because I didn't give him my real name.
Say, how would he know it?
Yeah, I didn't give him my real name. I gave him another name. It turns out that the woman he had called, of course, is Cindy Hindi. And Cynthia's quote is, a girl came out from behind a curtain inside the RV, and she shot me with a cattle prod, and that's when she blacks out.
So that incapacitates her. So. And
now that she's shot and in the back of the RV, she wakes up chained to the back of the RV to a pole. And they're driving down the RV, or they're driving down the road. Well, she's alone back there. Cindy's up in front and David's driving. Well, she's able to work that pole and get loose. She's still handcuffed, but she gets loose from the RV. And she's decided that she's watching them through the crack in the door, and she's going to wait till it gets slowed down, and she's going to break for the door on the side of the RV, the exit door, and she's going to jump out. She'd already decided that she'd rather risk jumping out than not.
I would have done the same thing.
So she said they started slowing down. Just as she cracked the door open to make her run for it, David slams on the brakes, which causes her to fall forward into the floor. At which point, Cindy jumps back on her and holds her down, and they're fighting, and David is able to pull off the side of the road safely. He gets up, drags her back to the bedroom of the RV, and they shock her again. And at this point, she goes out completely. I'm sure they either chloroformed her or hit her in the head or something as well. But
did something to render her unconscious anyway.
Because when
if they're using a cattle prod, though, that's a lot more voltage than like your standard taser, like that, me or the Tiny Tiger or, somebody else would carry. That's a big deal. It's meant to shock cattle.
Exactly. Yeah, they could turn that thing up and really cause damage.
Yeah.
But this knocks her out completely. And this is where the tape comes into view. It comes into play because Cynthia, spoiler alert, she escapes. We'll get to that later. But Cynthia says she wakes up already naked, already strapped down to the chair. She can see herself in the mirror on the ceiling. She can't move hardly. And that tape begins to play. And it goes into the detail of what's going on. It talks about how if you're hearing this tape, then you know where you're at. This is what's going to happen to you. You're not going to escape. There's no knight in shining armor going to come save you. This is exactly what we're going to do to you. And he goes into great detail explaining out basically how when you wake up in the morning, we're going to start doing these things to you until we get tired, and you're just going to have to deal with it and get used to it. He says that his goal is to break them to the point that they begin to like it. But he don't even care if they like it or not because it's all about them.
Yeah. I mean, if they came to convince themselves that they liked it, that removes the element of torture.
Mm-hmm.
So he would have been tired of them at that point anyway. And I think, too, I got to thinking about this earlier when he talks about, I have no intention. I don't want to kill you. I typically try not to do that, blah, blah, blah. You'll live, which is better than the alternative. I think that might have been a lie because when you're in that kind of situation, that kind of hope that you give them is cruel.
Right.
It is the cruelest. I mean, other than everything else that he was doing, that is one of the cruelest things that he did was to give them that hope that, okay, at least I'll survive this.
Right. All I got to do is endure this and go. But he tells them that I'll have you for 1 to 2 months, maybe even 3 months until I get tired of you. He likes.
If you kept pleasing them, they'd keep you around for longer.
Well, he said that he likes them young and fresh. And once the freshness wore off, he wanted a new one. But his lady would have a different way that she would prefer to keep you for a long time because it makes it less likely them getting caught by having to get a new play toy.
I mean, he was taking risks by hunting, but that's part of the thrill for him. So he was not going to give that up.
But we already know that he had Cindy Hindi with him, and then she partook in the torture. He also had, we mentioned earlier, some other accomplices, what he called friends, would come over.
Yeah. He even alleges that there were other quote unquote girlfriends that he had that were also in on this. Yeah. But to my knowledge, Cindy's the only one who ever.
Him and Cindy's the only ones that ever got arrested.
Yeah. Like I don't think he ever named any other names. I don't think anybody else, the men who he brought over for little parties, I guess you could call them. I guess he never named them or anything because to my knowledge, nobody else really got arrested in connection with these crimes.
No, it was just him and Cindy.
Well, he can keep a secret then.
Yeah. You never know. I mean, the people that come over, I sure wouldn't say anything. It might not have helped him out any to name names.
No, I mean, he was a mastermind behind it all, so they were going to get him for everything they could. But,
yeah.
The only charges he ever caught were for kidnapping, the rapes, tortures. I think he ended up getting convicted and sentenced to like 224 years.
224 years, yeah.
So, I mean, and that's mainly because of how sadistic and how heinous the torture itself was.
Yeah. So getting back to Cindy, and again, we'll get into her later. Like I said, she does get arrested, and it's just mind-boggling how this plays out with her. I don't know how in the world this happened, but we see this way too often too. Sometimes people getting away with things that I don't think they should get away with.
Well, especially if you're a female accomplice, and
Yeah.
I will go ahead and say that. I mean, women tend to get off with much lighter sentences, and I hate that. But
well, in Ray's tape here, he gave them that hope of saying that
we're at least not going to kill you.
Yeah. But Cindy here in her statements against him says that he bragged about killing them.
Oh, I mean, he would talk to her about how he disposed of them and everything. And actually, it was planned that he was going to take cops to where he disposed of some bodies, but then he died before he could ever do that.
Well, yeah, they gave placements of where, but when they went to dig them up and check, they couldn't find anything. And it was out in the deserts. So, I mean, if the map's not accurate, then you could dig for years in the general area and not ever find anything because it all looks the same a lot.
And I mean, you got the predators that naturally live in the desert too, depending on if he buried the bodies and everything. If it was just kind of a shallow grave, they probably dug up the bodies.
Could have very well dug them up, yeah.
Carried off the remains and.
Well, I bet he didn't do a whole lot of work to bury them deep.
Probably not. Again, that was more incidental. The murder, the potential murders and everything. That was more like tidying up for him.
Well, I read too that, and part of the bragging to her, that he would dismember the bodies and scatter them out in the desert as well. He wouldn't always bury them. He would scatter them.
Yeah, sometimes he used lakes too.
Yeah, and said one of the things he did was use a nearby lake as well, which makes me wonder why they couldn't dredge that lake, you know.
I'm sure they probably did.
But again, depending on the size of the lake, it's needle and haystack type
mean,
thing.
at the very least, maybe send divers out.
Yeah. Her quote on this is, she later stated that Ray bragged that he knew how to kill someone and bury them in the lake so that they would never be found. The thing to do is cut them down the belly, scoop out their guts, fill the chest cavity with cement, and then use baling wire to wrap them back up. And then you dump them into the lake and they sink down, and the cement keeps them down there.
And then whatever lives in the lake, I mean,
would feed off that.
Yeah.
And then again, also with dismemberment and scattering the remains out into the desert, I assuming for the animals to take care of.
Yeah.
And then, of course, burying them in different places. So he was bragging to Cindy openly about how to dispose of bodies and that he was murdering these women.
Just like he had done with his first wife.
Yeah. So to me, that leads to the whole thing about him brainwashing was just to give them hope that they would actually live at the end of it.
I think that was definitely part of the psychological and emotional torture that he inflicted on them.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, in that particular situation, hope is the cruelest thing you can give a person, especially if you have absolutely no intention of doing what you tell them that you're going to do.
Right.
Because how many of these women? I think they confirmed 14.
That's what they confirmed and charged him with.
Yeah,
14.
and that's just for the torture, the rapes, the kidnappings. Those are 14 confirmed. They estimate it could be closer to 60.
Well, there's 14 confirmed. Well, what they consider confirmed.
Yeah.
There's 14. He bragged about a minimum of 40.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you add that stuff together and other ideas, they say it could be 60 or over easily.
I mean, was it in the tape or was it in interviews after he was arrested that he said that if he were killing women and everything, that there would be bodies scattered all over the country?
Oh yeah, it's part in the tapes. He mentions that as well. That if
remember this trailer and everything was mobile still. Yeah. It stayed out behind his house most of the time, but he was able to move it.
Yeah, they said that he is in that tape later on that he's one of the reasons he was trying to tell his victims that don't worry, I'm not going to kill you, is he said, because if I killed every one of you, there would be bodies scattered all over the country.
Yeah.
So that was another way to reassure his victims that they would get out of this alive.
Right.
If they, played along, was a good.
Like, okay, well, other women survived this. I can survive this too.
But I think that was absolutely psychological torment right there. I don't think.
I truly do not think that any of these women that he tortured and did all these horrible things to, I don't think any of them survived it.
Well, we know of at
least one.
We know of 2 that survived.
The other one died natural causes or something unrelated later on in life.
I'll mention her later. Well, since we brought it up, I'll mention her now. I've got her name somewhere. I can find it real quick, but she goes through all the torture that he is putting his victims through. And again, remember, now he's just going to brainwash you because that's a lot better than having your throat slit and killing you.
He was using like benzos and everything, and I kind of forget what it's called now, but its nickname is just that truth serum.
Yes.
But those are very powerful hypnotic drugs and everything, which, you heard him talk about in that clip that we played.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, these women probably are very drugged up for the duration of a lot of this, which, well, he probably did not drug them while he was torturing them because torture is what he needs. But at least for this one woman, I'm sure she was doped to the gills by the time that all this other stuff happened to her.
The one that
you're trying to.
Yeah, the one that gets away. So what they done is after he was going to release her and do the brainwashing, he cleans her up like they said. They, dress her like they said, and they drug her. Well, instead of doing the brainwashing like he said he's going to do, he drives her out into this, out in the middle of nowhere on this country road, pulls her out of the car, slits her throat, and throws her in the ditch.
Yeah.
And then he leaves. What he didn't do was he didn't kill her. She survives that.
But, I mean, that the intent was just to kill
her.
The
intent was 100% to kill her. 100%.
Which you got to wonder now, how many other women did he do this to? And they chalked it up to, somebody else or, just an unsolved murder. I mean, there's probably so many cold cases out there in New Mexico.
Oh, I'm sure.
That could be attributed to him that we have no way of proving.
Again, and we're not saying he may not have done that throat slitting thing very often. He could have done the other things mixed up because he claimed dismemberment and scattering them. He claimed burying them, and he claimed putting them in the lake.
It seems too lazy for him. He was very meticulous.
And then he got the ones where he's slashing the throat. So he was changing his MO. He was doing different things so they wouldn't be a pattern to finding these bodies. Which is really smart.
I mean, I've always said that, like, if I were to ever be that kind of person,
Yeah.
You definitely.
We're live. There's people listening. We're going into this detail.
One moment. Legal disclaimer to cover the station and the host asked. This is Laura completely speculating. At no point is she admitting to having ever done or does she ever intend to commit any acts she's about to discuss.
That's correct.
Correct. But I mean, and I kind of call this the CSI effect is actually more to do with like how juries respond these days because of shows like CSI. They're able to understand kind of the more technical jargon better. But I think another aspect of the CSI effect has been to help people get away with crimes. Because now you know what police are generally looking for. You know how they can find you. So changing up your MO.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, don't target anybody specifically because immediately that inner circle is going to be the first people they look at. But yeah, I mean, those kind of shows, those kind of movies where it is a very kind of procedural thing is letting people know, okay, if I avoid these things. Oh, yes, it was sodium pentothal. Yeah, that's the one.
I have to interject here because as somebody that's actually done some court cases where CSI evidence has been used, the CSI crime shows have screwed up everybody's perspective on that stuff. You don't get results back in 5 minutes like they do on TV. These people are like, well, why did it take them 3 weeks to get the results back? Because it's not CSI Miami. Shut the fuck up.
I say, I mean, used to when DNA was, really just kind of breaking through with the science and everything, it would take months to years to get results back.
Yeah, even now.
I mean, nowadays, because of databases and everything that authorities have, If the DNA is already on file, yes, you can come up with a match in probably a day or two, just running it against everybody in the database. So that kind of simplifies things a little bit. And nowadays, those a lot of authorities, departments and everything are starting to use these genealogy websites. Because I think nowadays you have to sign a disclaimer like, hey, we will, if subpoenaed or, a warrant is given, we will release your genetic profile to authorities, for them to check against somebody else. That's actually how the Golden State Killer was caught, was through a genealogy database.
Yep.
So these kind of tools, technology is actually helping us. And that's why I think we don't really hear about serial killers as much as back then, especially during like the 60s and 70s, which was like the heyday for serial killers. We don't hear about it as much because it's easier to catch them thanks to technology.
Yeah.
So, that's always a good thing.
Yeah, if you're on the right side of the law like we are, it's a good thing.
Well, that's also why I'm not doing one of those genealogy things, even though I'm really curious. I'm like, you can't have my DNA. Yeah. No. And I hadn't even done anything.
So I've been looking this entire time trying to find this lady's name. And for the life of me, I don't know what I've done with it. I wrote it down, but I don't know what I did with it. But she's laying in this ditch, right? Of course, bleeding out. Well, she comes to, at this point, I'm assuming that he didn't nick any major arteries or anything, because obviously she stops bleeding and is able to walk. So,
even jugular's closer to the surface, but a carotid hit is pretty much instant. You only got 2-3 minutes tops if the carotid's hit.
So, old boy is driving down this dirt road, and he sees this woman walking on the side of the road, assuming it's going to be a hitchhiker. He slows down. When she turns around to look at him, it said that her entire front was just solid red with matted blood, just covered.
She had to have been out there for a while then before she got up, and
she was very
disoriented,
probably from loss of blood and the drugs still in her system. But luckily he helps her, takes her into town, going to take her to the hospital. And at this point, they start treating her, and they bring the cops in because obviously her throat's been slashed. So here is number 3. We talked about his daughter, talked about his first wife. Mm-hmm. This woman gives a description, tells what happened to her, but she couldn't come up with details, didn't know his name or anything. Just describe the trailer, the inside of the trailer, describe the guy and Cindy, and the cops never followed up. They took the report, but they didn't even send anybody out there to check.
Did they connect it to like, oh, okay, well, that description sounds a lot like this guy David I know
later. I don't know. No. The cops don't follow up at all. They file it away and never take one look at it.
Gets buried under other cases.
They don't even send somebody out there where the guy picked her up on the side of the road to check. They don't even do that. They completely drop the ball on this and don't even follow up on it.
Yeah. And that sadly happens entirely too often.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in, I guess more metropolitan cities and stuff, the big inner cities. But from what I know, I don't know if Elephant Butte, that's where he lived.
Yeah.
In New Mexico. If that was, I don't know the size of that.
I have no idea.
Town or city.
But I'm calling it Elephant Butt because I know for a fact that they called it Elephant Butt. And then they said, well, we got to put an E on into that and make it Elephant Butte. But no, bull crap. That's Elephant Butt. They know it's Elephant Butt. They just need to accept it.
I don't know. New Mexico also, he worked at the Parks Department in Truth and Consequences, New Mexico. So they've got odd names.
Truth and Consequences for the Undertaker's from. That makes sense. I like Truth and Consequences. That's a cool name. But there's no way those people in Elephant Butte know what a butte is. It's Elephant Butt, and that's it. Quit churching it up.
I needed that because I know it sounds weird sometimes, like to hear us laughter in shows like this, especially like this one, but those moments of levity I think are absolutely necessary because it's so horrific what we're talking about.
Yeah, you have to. So this woman, like I said, the cops didn't follow up on it. It kind of got shoved back. This was 2 months before they finally get caught. So this was February of 1999. That's when this woman gets caught, or when she gets freed, and when she makes her report. Because in March of 1999, we go back to Cynthia. Now again, I'm sorry about this last name. I can spell it for you if you want it, but I have no idea how to pronounce it. Cynthia, Jaramillo.
So I'm thinking it's like Jaramillo or something, that soft J.
I'm assuming it would be the soft J.
In
But
New Mexico, you would think.
yeah, her name's Cynthia.
It would be Jaramillo.
Okay.
Awesome. Jaramillo. Thank you, Rick, because like I said, I was at a loss on that for sure.
I say we're Southern. A lot of fancy names are kind of beyond us.
Mm-hmm. So now we've already seen where Cynthia escaped from the back room of the RV. She got out into the main part. Cindy comes back. I don't know if I mentioned that Cindy had a gun at this point. I don't know. But anyway, she jumps on her and kind of holds her down. They're fighting. Ray pulls over. They force Cynthia back into the back, cattle prod her, and then some way they knock her out, and she's out cold for a pretty long amount of time. Enough time to get back to his place, enough time to strip her down, move her into the trailer, and then strap her down and everything.
Yeah.
So she wakes up, again, already in the chair. The tape's playing. Now, they had cameras set up inside the toy box. And inside his home, he had the screens so that he could see what was going on inside the toy box and keep an eye on them. And he could turn that tape player on remotely from inside his own home. So he knew when they woke up when he can mash the button and start that tape. And again, the tape was 45 minutes of just detailed what he's about to do to her.
These already terrified and traumatized women, this is what they wake up to. Now they've got to spend nearly an hour listening in very intimate and graphic detail what is going to happen to them.
Yeah.
I mean, he would even tell them the toys, the tools, everything. He would go into extreme detail telling them exactly how he was going to use them.
Mm-hmm. Of what the tools was for. I mean, everything. I mean, he was again, if you want to listen to this on YouTube, David Parker Ray, just search it up, David Parker Ray, tape, it's easy to find if you want to. But again,
that's entirely up to y'all. Like, we choose not to play it because it's too much. I've listened to that tape only one time in its entirety, just the one time. And I mean, even tonight, sitting here listening to that little clip was painful.
Yeah, and it's 45 minutes worth of it. So I would not suggest you do it, but it's out there if y'all want to. It's not an enjoyable experience.
I am too easily able to put myself in somebody else's shoes and, kind of empathize or understand maybe a little bit what they're going through. And especially as a woman, like I said, these gynecological chairs, this is already the most exposed and the most vulnerable you can be with another human being. And at least most times it's with a doctor you can trust. So it's not all that bad. But now you're in that position. You're stripped completely naked. You cannot get up off of this table. You can barely even move. You are, literally spread eagle, just laying there kind of open and exposed, so to speak. And now you've got to hear for nearly an hour. You've got to lay there. You can't do anything else. You can't move. You can't cover your ears. You can't tune it out. You just have to listen to it.
Yeah.
So you have an hour now to process the torture that you're about to experience.
Hmm. But again, like I said, it's not enjoyable at all. So, this is not something to sit down with and go like, ooh, let's watch this little video. It's bad.
Yeah, I mean, we're even kind of glossing over a lot of it, and it's still hard to talk about.
When I say I listened to it today, and when I say he goes into detail, it is graphic detail. There's nothing good about
he's not
this.
shy about anything in that tape.
Mm-mm.
I mean,
and the thing was, is he would do it in a way, he even talks about it, he wanted them to stay attractive to him. So he caused so much damage and pain to these women, but he done it in a way that it didn't scar their outward appearance.
It didn't disfigure them, really.
Yeah, it didn't disfigure them because he wanted them to still look good.
Yeah.
So everything he was doing was basically internal.
Yeah, he knew. Like I said, he was very, very meticulous and very, very controlled. I mean, he's a textbook example of an organized killer versus a disorganized, like the Richard Trenton Chase. Extremely disorganized killer there.
So Cynthia says that another quote, she says, the more pain that I showed, the more I hurt, the more he got off. So he definitely was into that's what it was about.
The torture was the paraphilia in play there.
She quotes saying while she was there that she would be strapped into the chair for hours on end, being tortured by both of them. The rest of the time when she wasn't in the chair, she had a metal dog. They call it a dog collar. I also heard it called a slave collar around their neck, and was chained by that to a pole in the bed that they got. They did have a bed to sleep in, but it wasn't. I mean, it's basically just a box spring type mattress. It wasn't anything fancy. Just a place like a dog bed, really, for them to lay down on.
Right.
Everything was chained and padlocked together. There was no weak links. There was nothing that she could unclip or unscrew to go away. Everything was very well controlled and tied together with padlocks, because the collar stayed on all the time, and it was they would padlock the collar to the chains, and when they would move her from the chair to the other tables to other things that he had made, they would unclip the chain from the collar and then use that same collar to clip down in other places. So that matters in a second. The collar was attached by a padlock to all the different chains and all the different torture devices. And the reason that matters is that's how she kind of escapes. So while all this was going on, Cynthia had a strong will to live. She decided that she was going to play along with them until she found a way to get out. She figured that if she showed to be passive and not fight back and not give them any trouble, that eventually
they get bored with her.
Well, they would be less vigilant with her. They would kind of get lazy around her. Comfortable. That's a good word for it.
They got complacent.
Yeah, they wanted
that she was any kind of threat.
She said when they would take me from one room to the other, because sometimes they would take them out of the trailer and into the house and things like that. But most of the torture was done inside the trailer, and the trailer had different sections set up. So when she says they would take me from one room to the next, she was talking about the little sections inside that trailer. I would see all these rules posted all over the walls and on the cabinets. And one of them that was posted over and over was, don't trust a chained captive. So that's what really set in her mind to gain their trust, to kind of lull them into a sense of
false sense of security.
Yeah. To get, like I said, make them comfortable, make them get sloppy in a way. So, at that point, she decided that she will get out of this alive. She knew she would. So 3 days after making her plan, she finally gets her chance. Ray had left. Cindy Hindi was the one that was there with Cynthia at this time. And it was late in the evening, and she was chained like always. And I'll just read what she says because it's easier to do it this way. Her quote is, this is Cynthia talking. I realized she, Cindy Hindi, had left the keys on the coffee table. These keys are for that padlock that's around her neck, holding the collar to the chain. She said, I put my feet up under the fence because they kept her little bed and everything was inside a chain link fence, like a dog fence inside the thing. So she put her feet up under there to the table and pulled the table towards her, because on the table was the keys for that padlock laying on the coffee table. And what the distraction was is that Cindy had received a phone call about her and David Parker Ray's legitimate business, their work business, him being, I can't remember.
He was a maintenance guy for the Parks Department.
So it was a work phone call that she took, and knowing that she couldn't stand there with the prisoner, she left the trailer, left the toy box so that she could take that phone call outside. And she was really excited when it happened, and she didn't think about it. She walked out and left the keys laying on the table. Again, Cynthia was smart enough to play along, made her not really got in that false sense of security, got her lazy or not lazy, complacent, and she walks out leaving the keys. Cynthia gets her legs out from under enough to grab the coffee table leg, pulls the table close enough to her that she can reach through the fence, get the keys. She, with the keys in her hand, Cynthia worked quickly to unlock the padlock that kept her chained, and the second key was on for the gate to the fence that she was in. And since she was on the second key, unlocking her gate, when Cindy Hindi had walked back into the trailer, back into the room. She says that she saw that Cynthia was freed and just kind of froze, just kind of in shock, which allowed Cynthia to open the door fully. And at this point, she was completely free inside the trailer still, but she was no longer contained neither in the fence nor by collar. She was free to move around. She
had the element of surprise on her side too, because Cindy got complacent.
Yeah.
And
so immediately Cynthia charged. Cindy grabs a lamp, which was the closest thing to her. She grabs a lamp and starts beating her with the lamp. Cynthia says that she got that lamp and started beating me with it. So they get to a fight. They're struggling all over the trailer, I'm sure, knocking into things, whatnot, because it's a contained area. There's not a lot of room to fight. Well, she gets her hands on an ice pick, one of the tools that they like to use. And she takes that ice pick and jabs it into the neck of Cindy Hindi. And, of course, that stops the fight because she's bleeding. So she also was able to grab a phone, and so she could call 911. Okay, so Cynthia says, when she grabbed her head after she stabbed her with an ice pick, I jumped from the bed to the living room floor and just bolted out the door. So instead of calling 911 at the time, even though she had the phone there, she saw the door to the trailer was open. Cindy was bleeding, holding on to her head
she
from
was
the
focused
head.
on herself.
Yeah. So instead of trying to call 911 then, she did the right thing and ran away.
As if she got the hell out.
Yes, she did. So for the first time in several days, Cynthia now, she's outside. She's free. She's away from the trailer. Has no idea where she is. No clue whatsoever where she is. Because remember, she was knocked out, blackout in the RV. Mm-hmm. She wakes up in the trailer. So she has no clue whatsoever of where she's at. So she just runs down the driveway until she gets to a road, picks a direction, and starts running. Now,
I mean, that's exactly what I would do. I mean, yes, I got a phone in my hand and I could call the police, but I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to get to a house with other people and then I'm going to call the police.
Well, she threw the phone down. She didn't take the phone with her. But I imagine 99, I don't know if it would have been a cell phone or just a house type phone. But
see, that's what I was wondering, some kind of just cordless phone or if they had one of the early cell phones.
I'm assuming probably a cordless
That's
phone.
what I'm thinking.
That's what I'm thinking too. So she's running down this road. Her quote is, "I just ran up the road and was screaming at every car that I could see." And finally, a car does see her and slows down, cracks her window, and Cynthia is begging for help. I mean, she's screaming, begging for help. She grabs hold of the window, and the woman in the car who was driving just floors it and takes off and leaves her standing in the middle of the road.
I mean, to me, that's kind of understandable too. I mean, you would think if even on our road right here, if that happened to me, I'm going to be like, okay, I'm going to get somewhere. I need to call the police about this.
That's all. It's not in this story, but it's one I read earlier. Cynthia says she doesn't blame that woman at all.
Yeah.
You know, she doesn't have no hard feelings towards her or anything because she knows what she looked like.
Yeah. And I mean, that woman had no idea.
Yeah.
I mean,
because here she is. Cynthia is butt naked, barefoot on this road, covered with blood at this point because of the fight and everything that was going on in the trailer. So yeah, that woman, that stranger, she drove
was right to be terrified of that too.
Exactly. So Cynthia sees the direction the car drives in, so she just runs that same direction. And she sees off to the side coming up onto a house. It says it's a trailer, so I'm assuming like a mobile home.
Yeah.
That has its lights on. So she assumes somebody's home. It's the first sign of life that she sees other than this car passing by. So she turns and she runs up that driveway to this trailer. And this is where I think God led her to this trailer, because we know what she looks like and the state that she's in. The people she meets in this trailer are the perfect people to meet. It says that she runs up the porch, busts through the front door because it was unlocked, runs through the living room into the kitchen because she's just running. Inside the kitchen is a little old lady washing dishes after supper. And it says that the lady turns around. It says inside the home there was an elderly woman washing dishes. Her husband walked in from the living room, and
so she ran right past him
and stops and looks at him in the doorway. Cindy is panicked. Cynthia is panicked. She's covered with blood and she's completely naked. She's
hysterical, probably.
On the verge of being hysterical for sure.
Yeah.
But she still can talk, right? So the little old lady calmly, very, very calmly walks toward her and tells her just to calm down. You're okay now. The husband from the doorway says, I heard a noise. What's going on? And he sees her now fully bloody and naked. And she says that he just froze in the doorway watching what was going on. She said that the lady, instead of chasing her off, her and the husband became very protective. He goes back and locks the front door. They come back into the kitchen. The old woman is already got 911 and got the police on the phone. And the husband comes in with a robe and covers her up with a robe so she's not naked anymore. They get her set down, calming her down, reassuring her that everything's going to be okay. It says the man kept assuring her that he is not going to let anyone get you. He says, the quote is, I'm not going to let anyone get you. And she was telling him, like, he's got a gun. He's going to come get me. He's going to come here. He's going to find me. And the man, the husband kept telling her, no, you're safe here. I won't let him get you. You're going to be okay. So again, perfect people for her to run into because they handled it perfect. I don't know how I would react if something like
I'd be terrified. Oh, yeah. I mean, I would obviously want to help, but these days, I mean, you know, all the movies and the true crime stuff I've watched, I would wonder, okay, is this being faked? Like, is she a decoy or something? That thought would always be in the back of my mind.
You can't think about what you would think because you're not a normal person. Of
That's-
course,
okay,
you're going to
that's-
think that way.
That's fair.
So, of course, the police arrive at this couple's house, and she tells them what's going on, and the police immediately go down the road because it wasn't far. They go down the road to David Ray Parker's house, and they find both him and Cindy Hindi there on the property, and they immediately arrest them.
I'm saying, you know, Cindy's got the injuries to prove the story is true.
Oh yeah, she needed medical attention. They had to take her to the hospital to get checked, to get worked on too.
Good for Cynthia.
Oh yeah, for sure. So Cynthia calls that couple, and the couple's not named. I guess this, for whatever reason, in this report they don't give their names, and that might be because they didn't want it. But she says to this day she calls them her guardian angels and that they saved her life. And I think she's right.
Yeah. I mean, she could have turned any which way on any of those roads and never reached their house, but she did.
I just like the idea that she saw that light on that house was on, and she went to that light, and that was that couple. So, I mean, when we leave the house, we not home, we still leave the light on.
Yeah.
And these people out in this desert, out in the rural areas of New Mexico out there, they had their light on and was home, and it worked out. She very easily could have went to an empty house.
Yeah.
So they get arrested, Ray and Hindi do. And the next time that Cynthia sees them would be in the courtroom during the trial and everything. She did testify in writing. I don't think she took the stand, but she did do the, what's that called, where they write it?
I mean, it is still testimony.
Is it testimony?
So,
yeah. But it was written. She didn't have to take the stand.
Yeah, a lot of times when a victim has gone through something like that, I mean, even just, I kind of hate to say that there are like tiers of rape victims here, but, you know, there's even just your normal, typical rape victim. It's obviously awful what happened to them, so they don't even make them take the stand. They can either do a video testimony and it can be played for the court, or they can do a written testimony and maybe the court reporter or somebody reads it.
Right.
But they usually, for people that have gone through stuff like that, I don't think it's necessarily mandatory that you take the stand.
Yeah. Well, so once this gets arrested, they have aerial footage. You saw some, Rick was showing on here earlier, pictures from inside the trailer of the toy box and aerial footage of the property. They put pictures of Ray and Hindi up, their mugshots in court case. You know, you see them out there. And this woman earlier that survived the throat slashing, she sees them and she goes back to the police like, that's them. That's the people I told you about. So they immediately add charges to Ray and Hindi on her behalf because of, you know, they already got them on this other stuff. So they added that too. So there was going to be 3 separate court cases. The first one was going to be for the sexual torture and kidnapping of Cynthia. The second would be for this other lady that I can't remember her name. And the third one was going to be for the everything else they found, the other evidence that they found of the tortures. Right. Because when they found the trailer, immediately they got search warrants for everything. They searched inside his house. They found articles of clothing, IDs, jewelry for.
And actually, yeah, the FBI, they're still trying to connect some of the trophies that they found in his house to victims. So if after the show and everything, I'll post that link on my X page and my Facebook for y'all to look over.
Well, I think that's where they got the 14 for, is because they was able to tie some of his trophies to those people. Mm-hmm. They never found bodies, but they was able to tie that stuff to those
friends,
women.
Family members identified, hey, that belonged to so-and-so. And
so they had 3 different court cases basically for the same things. Well, the one with the FBI's case with all the evidence, it goes through.
Yeah, because kidnapping is a federal charge. That automatically put that in their jurisdiction.
Right. And then the sexual kidnapping and the sexual torture of Cynthia, because she was able to give testimony against, that goes through. But sadly, the second lady, they drop her case because she dies of pneumonia at the age of 28. And she dies before it's able to go to trial. So they wound up dropping that case. I guess no victim, no case type scenario. But they had
never gotten a detailed testimony from her that they could have, because they can use that after death too. Yeah. So,
but they could have dropped it too, because they had so much other stuff going on.
Yeah, AK, we mentioned his daughter was actually was counted. Well, I don't know if you would really say an accomplice necessarily, but she was so young that I think that you see a lot of these killers would use, like, women and children are kind of a way to disarm whoever you're targeting, because they think it's a woman, it's a child, they're not going to do anything to hurt me. Yep. But then you got this guy watching and waiting in the wings, Right.
So, like I said, sadly, this lady's, and I hate myself for losing her name, but she dies before it goes to trial, so they drop those charges. But that's not okay. It's sad. But Ray winds up getting 224 consecutive years in prison for what they did have on him already. Now, of course, they get interviews with him. He never really talks about how many victims exactly. He did give police some of the locations where bodies supposedly were buried out in the desert and stuff, but they never was able to find any bodies to tie to him. So they couldn't confirm all these bodies or these deaths. The number that they're estimating, again, 14 confirmed victims. They estimate from his testimony or just from his stories, from what Cindy says, at least 60 in total, but they don't have a total number, obviously. Again, never had a body, so they didn't get him on that.
And he died of a heart attack.
He died of a heart attack in 2002.
Yes. He was arrested
March 22nd.
March 22nd, 1999.
Yeah.
That was when he was arrested. But yeah, he died just a few years later, but he was promising to lead them to bodies before he died.
Yeah, he was still promising all these things to I guess to be more famous or whatever, that he was going to show them bodies and all this, but he died of a heart attack in prison before any of that happened.
So, I mean, even if he was serious and was going to, lead them to these women and everything, we never got that chance. Mm-hmm. And I think he got off entirely too easy. But, I was just reading up. Apparently, his daughter was not a child when she helped him on at least this one occasion. It's 1996. A woman named Kelly Garrett had a fight with her husband. Rather than stay at home, she went out playing pool at the bar with her friend Glenda Jean Jessie Ray. What she didn't realize at the time was that Jessie had an ulterior motive. It's believed that Jessie dosed Garrett's beer with a tranquilizer. Once she was subdued, Garrett was led back to Jessie's father's trailer and was held captive for 2 days. Says that Ray used cocktail drugs to keep her disoriented. That's the one that he slit her throat and left her by the side of the road. Kelly Garrett.
That's it, Kelly Garrett. Okay.
That's who that was. Okay. And it was his daughter, his own daughter, that helped get her.
Yeah. See, now, I want to follow up on her, because is that confirmed? Did she get arrested for it? Did she do any time for that kind of stuff? Or
I'm not quite seeing anything just yet. Jessie Ray is sentenced to prison. From interviews with Cynthia Hendy and the contents of David Parker Ray's journals, because he did have journals where he kept notes.
Well, they found them in the house for sure. Yeah.
They never detailed murders per se, but they did detail the tortures and the rapes.
Right. See, that's the thing that he did in those journals. He was smart in a way, because he never admitted to murders on paper or anything else. Now, to Cindy, Hindi, he did. He talked about murders with her all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So he talked about them, but he never put anything in writing.
I'm trying to see.
Glenda did put in jail.
Yeah,
so,
he went by her nickname is Jessie. So when you hear me say Jessie Ray, that's his daughter Glenda.
Okay, well, I heard him talk about Jessie Ray. I thought it was a guy because of the name. Okay.
As a result of a deal with prosecutors, Jessie was handed a 2.5-year sentence with 5 years probation for her role in helping abduct Garrett.
Okay, see, I thought that was one of his accomplices. I thought Jessie was a guy, so I didn't tie that together with Glenda.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I was going to mention that later, but I had it wrote down as a guy. So I'm glad that was cleared up. That's on me. Because and the way they found Jessie was through Cindy, because Cindy, when they get arrested, she tries to make a deal with the police.
Well, before we get into that, this does mention one other potential accomplice, a man named Dennis Yancey.
Yeah.
He was convicted for the 1999 strangulation death of Marie Parker.
Mm-hmm.
Yancey claimed that David Parker Ray took photos of Parker being assaulted and alleged that Ray and his daughter were involved in that murder.
Yeah, I was going to bring up him too. When I brought up Jessie, I was going to bring him up, but I thought Jessie was a guy, like I said.
Yeah, it says investigators could place David Parker Ray at the assault, but it was never proven that he or his daughter was responsible for that woman's death.
Yeah, he claims that Dennis guy, Dennis says that Ray talked him into it and basically forced him to kill the girl while he watched by strangling her.
Yeah, which kind of would be par for the course for him when you think about it. I mean, he enjoyed watching Cindy torture him too.
Well, he even mentions strangulation and slitting the throats, and we know he already slit one girl's throat, Kelly's throat, and he had Dennis strangle the other one. So we got record right there of his preferred method, and I think that's what he did with the rest of them, honestly.
Yeah.
But so Cynthia, well, I'll get back. I mean, Cindy. So Cindy, they get arrested. Cindy starts cutting deals immediately with the cops. In the beginning, she said that she had nothing to do with it, that she was a victim and he was forcing her to do all these things. Well, when they found these journals and other evidence and stuff inside the home, of course, I contradicted that because he kept very detailed journals of what was going on.
That, along with the trophies, is a very common way for them to relive the crime.
Right.
Like in between girls, because, you know, they probably, after dumping off one of the girls or doing whatever they did when they were done with her, there was probably kind of a small little break there
Very
in between
breaks,
the next abduction. Because, again, they would abduct up to 5 a year, so, and keep them 2 to 3 months at a time.
So Cindy, once they started finding more and more evidence, and they came back to her, this quote that she uses was kind of unique. They said, did you help him? And her quote is, no, well, kind of, is how she writes it off. And so anyway, she makes a deal with them at this point and to get a reduced sentence. And she winds up getting a sentence of, because in the beginning they was going to put her as an accomplice and get 224 years for her as well. So she makes a deal with them, a plea deal, turns evidence against him, gives the police Jessie, which winds up being his daughter, and the Dennis, the other guy. She turns them in as well, cutting these deals. And they reduce her sentence down to 36 years.
Yeah, we have Cindy Hindi.
Cindy Hindi.
Yeah, I know she spent about 20 of it in up to, I think, close to 20 years.
19.
Yeah.
So she gets 36 years. And but she winds up serving 19 of the 36. And supposedly they let her out because she was what's a good behavior?
Either that or was it parole or something?
Well, she was she would come up for parole.
But she, I mean, I guess she kept up appearances and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, she done about less than 20 years, between 19 and 20 years of her 36-year sentence. She would come up for parole and was able, and she got her parole and was able to be released after the 19 years. That was part of her plea deal, was that she would be able to come up for parole. And so she does her time. Supposedly she was supposed to be a good behavior, but there's reports that she was caught with drugs in prison and that she had stole some stuff from other inmates and things like that.
Keep in mind, I mean, that's what she did. I mean, when she and David Parker Ray met, she was fleeing from Washington State and everything for grand theft auto and drug charges.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is like they say that she was a good inmate, but records say that she wasn't.
Right.
Again, this is one of those weird things with the police that was going on, that are for ignoring 3 reports, not doing anything about it. And then his daughter, Glenda or Jessie, there's no reports. She's kind of kept quiet ever since she served her time and everything. But I know, as far as at least the most recent thing that I found on Cindy was from February 15th of this year. And she is back up 2024.
Yes. And she is living back in Kent, Washington, I think is what it was. Because obviously she's now, she has to register as a sex offender.
No, she does not. That was part of her plea deal. She does not have to register at all.
I wonder, because I figured that's how the neighbors found out.
No, the neighbors found out because of a news story that come out. And they basically outed her about it because part of her plea deal is that she doesn't have to register. She doesn't have to report to any kind of probation officer.
I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, especially not even registering as a sex offender, because she obviously has the mentality that makes her susceptible to a man like that.
Yeah. Didn't I read somewhere that she changed her name too?
She might have. I
can't confirm that. But anyways, she's in Kent, Washington as of February this year. She's living in Kent, Washington. And like I said, she doesn't have to register anything. She doesn't have to check in with a probation officer. All that's covered. All that's done. That was part of her deal. And what's crazy is less than when she come up for parole and was granted parole, which I think is ridiculous because of the way she acted in prison. It was less than 3 months after that, they passed a law that people have, in those type of sexual crimes and like that, they are required to spend 80% of their prison term. They have to stay at least 80% of it before they're allowed to go up to parole. And she'd done barely half.
Right.
So she would still be in prison basically if it had been just a few months after. If it had been delayed about 4 months, then that new law would have went into effect and she could still basically be in prison right now.
And I mean, thankfully, for all we know, she's living a pretty quiet life these days.
I'm sure you can look her up and find something, but I guess she's living quietly.
I mean, we haven't.
Hell, let's be honest. Right now, she could probably make an OnlyFans page of being a dominatrix and be making thousands of dollars every week. The way this world is right now, people would pay just because of who she is. People would pay
just
for that
because of the connection to those crimes and everything. That's a draw. I mean, Ted Bundy got married and got his wife pregnant in prison.
Yeah. There's a whole group of people that get into that stuff.
Yeah, it's. I don't understand people like that.
Yeah, but I guarantee you that if she was to do one of those OnlyFans pages and do that kind of stuff, that BDSM stuff, that there were people just because of who she is would sign up for it and watch.
Yeah, that's insane.
People are insane. And it's in Washington, so, I mean, it would fit right in.
I say Pacific Northwest and kind of the West Coast and everything, it's kind of spawned a lot of very bad people.
Weirdos.
I mean, you got to think, I don't have an exact percentage, but if you look at like where our most prominent serial killers have come from, it's typically California, Oregon, the Seattle areas.
Yeah. All the way up into Canada like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Serial killers and Bigfoot, they all live in the same area for some reason.
So it's very bizarre.
But yeah, she's back out on the trail as happy as can be, living her life. up in Washington. And the worst part of it to me is that David Parker Ray died in 2002. He didn't get to live out and be punished with. It just seemed too easy for him to die of a heart attack, you know?
Yeah. People like that, even crimes like that, I know they didn't get him on any murder charges, but I still think that what he did should have been a capital offense, and he should have gotten death for it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
I mean, that kind of sadism and everything, just the pleasure that he took.
Well, he couldn't get parole. He was going to be life in prison.
Yeah, but
so there's no way of him getting out.
I would have made sure that life in prison would have been a shorter sentence.
I think with the amount of stuff they had on him and the fact that they didn't have any bodies, I think they did the right thing by not going after murder.
Yeah.
Because if it fell through,
I say there's still enough reasonable doubt that, maybe he did release them, maybe he did brainwash
exactly
them.
Right. Because like I said, they never found a body. He was very careful with his notes. And
every time he admitted to murder, it was hearsay to somebody else.
Yeah.
It was to a third party.
The one person the two people that survived him didn't die. They was alive. So, I mean, I can see why they didn't go for murder, maybe, Yeah.
I mean, a lot of times if you don't have a body, a DA will not go after murder unless there is evidence, that leads to murder, even without a body. Sometimes you can get by with that, but it's a very risky move.
Well, I think they did right, making sure they got him.
Yeah.
Got him in prison.
But those are really the only 3 names we have for any of these victims.
That we are, I mean, we could give you the name of the 14, but we don't know. We're not confirmed that he did kill them, and they could still just be missing persons type situation. I think that he probably did because of the evidence they found, but I don't know that we want to give those names out with the families involved. I mean,
yeah, because I mean, this is not like in the past or anything. I mean, this is just like 22 years ago or so when he was arrested or when he died. So,
yeah. So I mean, if it was one of my loved ones involved in this, I wouldn't want my loved one's name tied to him in any way.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, if it was the Tiny Tyrant, we'd be the same way. Just leave her name out of it.
If it was a Tiny Tyrant, all of New Mexico would be gone.
Just glass the area.
I would take care of everybody just to make sure. But yeah, like I said, this guy here, just the depravity of it, I mean, it's just a whole new level of sickness. If you want to look into it, of course, feel free to look, but it is not one that I suggest you go into. I did not enjoy any kind of research for this.
No. It turns the stomach.
You don't even get a satisfactory ending because she's walking free and dude dies way too early.
Natural causes, like.
Yeah. No prison justice or any of that stuff that you hear.
I mean, at least, with Dahmer, there was the prison justice like you're talking about, stuff like that. And Ted Bundy was executed. Gacy was executed. Like, you kind of get that closure with the killers like that. But this guy was so much worse than they were.
Mm-hmm. And there's so many loose ends, too, that bugs me about it. Like his accomplices, the friends that would come over for the parties.
Yeah, like we need those names, too, because, I mean, these are people that know what you're doing.
Oh, and here's another thing, too. There is another one that survived, now that I think about it. When Cindy and David first got together, they was sharing their fantasies together, and they decided to get their first victim. Their first victim is a friend of Cindy's, an acquaintance that they had made, a pretty good friend of hers. And they get her, just drinks, out for drinks type thing. They don't have to drug her or anything. She willingly comes back to their house. This is before the trailer wasn't in play here, not in the way that he normally does. They take her, they put her in the trailer. Again, she's willing at this point. And then they play with her over the course of several days. Now, at some point, she is no longer willing to do this. But they use her and abuse her. And at the end of it, they convince her just, hey, it was all in fun. yeah, okay, we got a little rough. We're sorry.
Yeah.
We'll just won't do it again. They let her go, and she never reports anything to the police because they convinced her that what they done wasn't a crime.
It was consensual
because she willingly agreed to. Now, once she started saying no and they didn't stop, I don't know why.
That's just it. Like I think that's a very important thing, especially for parents like us of young girls in particular. That part of consent, like you can agree to have a date with somebody, you can agree to have a drink with them, you can agree to go back and hang out to their place. But the very second you say no, everything that is happening needs to stop.
Yeah.
But of course, people like this, that's not even a concern for them.
Yeah.
They do not care.
I want to say this woman's name was Angela, the first name. And, but yeah, once they went to court and they started going on trial, she comes forward and shares her story as well. But like I said,
imagine how terrifying that would be, like knowing how close you potentially came to being one of their victims.
But
I mean, she was a victim at one point.
Oh, she absolutely was a victim. But yeah, the way they had approached it, because she agreed to go with them in the beginning and partake in it. She willingly got in the chair and done all that stuff, that she thought that she wasn't a victim, and she never reported it. But
and I mean, for a lot of rape victims, that is common, especially for like date rape instances. Well, I agreed to go on the date with him. You know, I agreed to go back to his place, or I invited him back home to my place for, you know, coffee or whatever else. They think that because they did that, that meant that everything that happened to them after that, even if they said no, it was still consensual. And that's just not how that works.
Yeah, exactly. But like I said, David was really smart, because him and Cindy both, the victims they chose were usually streetwalkers, you know, women working. They would get
victims of opportunity.
They would get the victims that nobody cared to look up.
They didn't really have a lot of strong family or community ties. Nobody would really miss them.
You see that a lot too with with their victims, because like I said, and it sounds horrible and mean, but the truth of it is, in most police departments, they have better things to do. They have other people to look for. They don't consider prostitutes to be a high value victim.
Not really a priority, because maybe they, you know, wandered off. Maybe they went to a different town.
That's one of the things they say a lot is, oh, they just got on the bus and left.
Yeah.
That's why they're missing.
They just went to a new city or something.
And that we saw that a lot with the pig farmer killer.
And eventually when we get to Gary Ridgway, the Green River killer, that's because he selected prostitutes as well for that specific reason, because nobody would look for them.
Exactly. And that's a lot of the times the police they don't follow through, because again, they don't see them. A lot of, I won't say all of them, but a lot of them don't value them as high value victims, and they don't look for them that much. Same way with homeless men or women. They don't they don't prioritize it. And it's sad in a whole new level, really, because these people are still people, you know.
And I mean, there are, especially nowadays, you see this rise in these advocacy groups that like help those victims, you know?
Yeah. And that's another thing. I'm glad you brought that up, because Cynthia, going back to her, has become a hero in all this, not only because of her standing up to the David Allen Ray and the David Parker Ray and Cindy, but she kept her cool throughout the whole trial. She attended the trial, but she, like I said, she didn't. I don't think she took the stand, but she turned her victimhood around on them, because now Cynthia is still out there out west, but she heads up a nonprofit, and she helps women who are homeless or the ones that have been prostitutes, and she gets them off the street. Her nonprofit works on them for rehab, for whatever it is. It gives them a place to stay, so they're not on the street anymore. It helps them find a job,
actual gainful employment. So she's actually using her quote unquote celebrity from this, and she's doing it for a good way. I mean, because I said she was on the street as well, and now she's helping those potential victims to get a better place and get them out of that environment where they could become get them steady on their feet again, basically.
Yeah. So she is she's definitely turn this horrific ordeal into something that's helping a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't even know if I could be that strong.
Oh, she claims now, she says she was a victim of him once, but she's not a victim for him always.
That's an amazing, like, just mentality to have, especially after going through something as awful as that.
Oh yeah. And I say, she's doing the best she can out of it and making a difference in the world from using
positive.
From using her, the most darkest time of her life, she's turned it around and making it a lot for someone else. And I think that's really honorable, and she should be applauded for that.
And I do usually about this point in the show, we do our in memoriam, but again, we don't really have any confirmed victim names. We've got the 3 women that we talked about, the Kelly Garrett, Cynthia Jaramillo, and Marie Parker, but those are the only names we have. But I guess we just want y'all to keep in mind that there were up to potentially 60 victims.
All women.
Yes, all women. And what's so sad is that, I mean, I don't like them being nameless. I mean, because their families have probably passed on by now, moms and dads and everything, and never got any of that closure, never figured out what happened to their children.
Now, the 3 victims we do know of, they were all in their 20s. But David Parker Ray actually mentions in some of his writings, and Cindy confirms that they locked them young teenage to mid-teenage girls is what he said he preferred. However, the 3 that we know of were in their 20s. So I don't know if that's just more of his, because it's in the tapes. If you listen to the tapes, it's mentioned in the tapes. So I don't know if that's more of his psychological warfare against his victims or if it was true. Because like I said, the only confirmed victims we have were well into their 20s at this point.
Right. And I mean, they may have just been, because they were older and everything, able to think more clearly and get away.
Yeah. And well, obviously, I mean, she had enough strength to fight back and was able to get away. So, but still, just this is the darkest, sickest. You can ask anybody who knows me knows that I hate rape more than murder. That may sound weird, but there's something about rape.
It's such a psychological issue, especially for women. I mean, even for men too, because I mean, I think a lot of rape victims, I think a lot more than we realize, are men and boys.
I just think that rape to me is so much worse psychologically and all that than even murder is. Yeah. I would assume someone just kill somebody than rape them. If it's rape in a movie, for instance, I just won't watch it. I won't watch it no more. It bothers me so much, just the idea of some cretin raping somebody.
I say, what's that horror movie, The Last House on the Left, that you just refuse to watch because of that whole opening scene?
No, I'm not gonna watch it.
I mean, and that one's rough for even me. Like, I'll get up and like find something else to do real quick while that scene's on. Like,
but so doing all the research and reading up on this, and it's been a rough day.
Like I said, I did not know at the time that we decided to do this episode on David Parker Ray that his birthday would have been the day after Election Day if he were still alive. He was born November 6th. So, but I did not plan that. The only reason we decided to do this was just because he was kind of hanging over our heads, and we just decided to rip that Band-Aid off and get it over with. So, like I said, we don't really have an in memoriam we can do tonight, but I mean, just keep in mind, like, there were at least, up to maybe 60 women and, girls that were either horrifically tortured and murdered or just tortured. I mean, either way, this is just, I don't even have the words for how bad it is. And y'all know me, stuff like this doesn't usually get to me, but just, if you're the praying type, send up a prayer for any of those victims. God knows who they are. I mean, he knows those names. But we have a tiny tyrant that we're going to have to pick up from a Halloween party. So I think we're going to start wrapping up.
It's like I said, we talked about doing it for Halloween and in October because everything's kind of the scary parts. And so we kind of focused more on personal scary stories and then the vampires because that was a thing. But it's been in my head all of October, and we discussed it, and we decided we need to get it over with.
Yeah.
And just get done with it.
Just take that plunge, put him behind us.
Because again, his victims, whether they be 3, 14, or 60, these are young women who who was treated in the most horrific manner that you could imagine for for God only knows for how long.
I mean, they were treated lower than animals.
And then they lost their life after it. I can't think of a worse, sicker, more twisted individual than this guy, because of the amount of time and work and effort he put in to be this depraved is astounding if you look into it.
I mean, it's honestly staggering. But I mean, these girls and these women, they were daughters, they were sisters, they belonged to somebody.
Yeah.
You know? So we always want to end remembering them and honoring them as best we can.
Yeah.
But
I don't know what else to add to that part.
Yeah.
So let's just go ahead and we'll kind of end the show. We got a few more minutes so we can talk about some upcoming shows on KLRN for tomorrow and the upcoming week. Of course, Front Porch Forensics is us. We are every other Saturday, so we'll be back
2 weeks from today.
Yeah, 2 weeks from tonight. We'll be back on the air 8 to 10 Central. And then you can find me on X as Bump Stock Ken. And that's pretty much all I am, is Front Porch Forensics and Bump Stock Ken on X.
And you help me run the Front Porch Forensics X page, which is FP_forensics, if y'all aren't already following that.
Yeah, at FP_forensics.
Mm-hmm. And then I'm Bump Stock Barbie. That's where y'all can find me. I'm the director of marketing and everything for KLRN now. I also write for Twitchy, so you can find my author page in my bio on X. But Rick, why don't you tell us what other shows we got coming up now?
Well, let's see. So tomorrow night, hang on. I don't know which one. He just put it out too, but I don't remember which one Jeff said he was doing tomorrow, because he does different ones every Sunday. But yeah, so while I'm looking for that one, I know Sunday Nights with Alan Ray is back. That one is at 9 Eastern. I'll be on at 10 Eastern doing kind of a pre-election news update. And then I'm looking to try to figure out which one Jeff posted about. Lost Wonder is tomorrow. That'll be at 8 p.m. Eastern. So we have full lineup tomorrow as far as our evening stuff. Now, Monday's normally my day off. However, it's election eve, so it will not be my day off. My day off will be Thursday. So as far as for tomorrow, again, we have Lost Wonder at 8 p.m. Eastern. We have Sunday Nights with Alan Ray at 9 p.m. Eastern. America Off Rails 10 p.m. Eastern. Monday, we have a bunch of stuff going on. I'll be doing my regular daily at noon Eastern, where we do kind of one day till Liberation Day, kind of give everybody a look at the polls, everything else. Then in the evening, we also have on KLR Radio's feed, we will have Spirited Books with Jeff and Aggie. Also, around the same time, I'll be hanging out over on the SHR Media feed doing a Get Out the Vote final night before election night coverage before we get full into election coverage on Tuesday, which puts me back on at noon, and then covering everything starting at 7 p.m. Eastern over here, and live blogging for Twitchy at 8 p.m. Eastern. And I think the Twitchy live blog starts at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. And we'll be on until we either have results or until they start packing up and going home like they did last year, or 4 years ago, because I kind of suspect some of that may be happening again. I hope not, but
I'm the same way.
But anyway, so that's it in a nutshell for the next few days, because there's so much going on that it would take me forever to explain the rest of it.
Well, absolutely. Daniel says goodnight. He is officially running out to pick up the Tiny Tyrant from her belated Halloween party at a friend's.
All right. Well, I guess unless you've got anything else to say, I guess we can shut this thing down for the night.
Nope, that's it. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you for listening in. I see it was my friend AK's first time listening live, so that's awesome. But yeah, all right. Y'all have a good night.
Enjoy the rest of your Saturday night. Thank you so much for hanging out with us here at KLRN Radio. For all of our staff here, this will conclude our broadcast day. Thank you guys so much. I know it was for how it's been in October, it was pretty light for us today, but I was pretty wiped out, so I'm kind of happy that it was. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
I listen to a lot of true crime. I listen to it at night. I like the girl talk. It makes me feel alright. I like scary stories in the morning, and I like them at night. I like the girl talk vibes. They make me feel just fine. I listen to a lot of true crime.
Hello, friends. Do you have a moment so that we may discuss our Lord and Savior Minarchy? No, seriously, I'm just kidding. Hi, my name's Rick Robinson. I am the general manager of KLRNradio.com. We are probably the largest independent podcast network that you've never heard of. We have a little bit of everything, and by that, what I mean to tell you is we have news, pop culture, special events, conspiratainment, true crime, mental health shows, drama productions, and pretty much everything in between. So if you're looking for a new podcast home to grab a little bit of everything that you love all in one place, come check us out. You can find us on X under @KLRNradio. You can find us on our Rumble and our YouTube channels under the same names. You can also find us at KLRNradio.com and pretty much every podcast catcher known to man. So again, feel free to come check us out anytime you like at KLRN. Say goodnight, Gracie.